Talia absolutely loved Bart Simon's wife, Irene. Irene operated a kindergarten school, Montessori kindergarten, not too far from Willie Ernst. And we regularly just dropped her off maybe 2 or 3 times a week. We dropped her off there. But as far as Talia was concerned, Irene was her teacher. Not anybody else's, it was her teacher. Now, the other thing that I might say of Talia at this stage, man, she was 4 or 5 years old. And we'd had friends come over, and of course, they may have had children who were Talia's same age, or even, in many cases, older than Talia. But Talia would organize them, and they're going to play school. But guess what? Talia was the teacher, and the other children were the kids, regardless of the fact that they were older than she was. Now, the Waterberg area is infested with leopards, if I can call it that. It's synonymous with leopards, especially if you are a cattle rancher. And leopards, they're cunning animals. They very, very soon find out that it's easier to prey on young cattle, calves, in other words, than it is to prey on young antelope. And of course, to the farmer's detriment. But it was what it was. Now, my ranch in particular, the camps were divided into paddocks or camps of probably around 120 hectares each, with, every 5 camps or so had a central watering point. Hmm? 100 and about 260. So one day we were rounding up the cattle to dip. And the laborers came back and they said, no, they're still looking for one particular cow that they can't find. And they knew that the cow had a calf, and something does not add up. Something does not add up. I told them, well, let's just wait and go and see if we can find it again. Let's find it, go out again. Now, that afternoon they came back. Yep, they found the cow. They found the calf, but the calf was up in a tree. I immediately knew what that meant. A leopard had gotten it, and the remainder of the calf was up in a tree. So I decided, okay, I'll make a plan. It's one of those things that you have to do. You didn't like killing leopards, but if you're cattle rancher, it's your existence. If a leopard kills a calf one every 3 days or whatever, you can imagine what that entails over the course of a year. It's your whole profit just by one leopard. Anyhow, they told me how they saw that this was a huge leopard and we had to make a plan. I knew it was going to return to consume where the carcass was up in the tree. So what we did was what we call, we'll rig a shotgun up in a tree, usually in an older shotgun, which at least had a hammer that you would cock to in order for the shotgun to fire. It was just an easier way and a safer way of doing it, using an older hammer type shotgun. Anyhow, you rigged it with a fishing line, etc., etc., and you aimed the shotgun in a point where right on the calf, but the leopard would have to walk on the branch and trigger the line, that is the tripwire, to put it that way. Okay, so we know that you don't go back when it's bad light to go and check a leopard that you have ambushed. So I expected to hear if that leopard came back and he would trip that flare. I mean, not the flare, the tripwire. That the shot would go off. I would hear it. It was not too far away from the house. And during the course of the night, I indeed heard the shot go off. But there's no ways you're going to go there before daylight. Anyhow, it was a very long night, but eventually, around about 7:30, when the sun was up and about and it was clear daylight, clear daylight, we went to check it, myself and Morris. Now, it's always better to, if you have the assistance of dogs, to take dogs with you, because they will smell that leopard and flush it out before you will see it. But you have to have dogs that are used to a leopard, because if they're not, and that leopard comes for them, those dogs are not going to run away or put up a fight. They're going to run towards you to come and look for help. Well, what they do, in effect, doing is they're leading the leopard to you. It's never a good idea to use dogs that don't know a leopard. Okay, so the other thing is, I knew I could trust on Morris Mogorosi's eyes, because, as I say, I always used to joke and say Mogorosi could see a rabbit in a warthog hole 150 yards away. His eyes were so damn good. Either that, or his eyes were that good, or his instincts were that good. But anyhow, we approached this set up carefully, double checking the wind, making sure that we're walking upwind or approaching it upwind. I took another shotgun at home, of course, loaded it. I took my Wingmaster, it was a Wingmaster 870 with 5 shots of shotgun shells in the magazine. When I was not too far from the leopard trap, shall I put it that way, I had one up the spout, and so I was ready. We approached it very carefully, and I was, as I say, my eyes are okay, and I really trusted Morris's eyes. But the next thing, there was just one yellow flash coming my way. Now, I can't remember if I had time to aim or what, but there was time to shoot. And I afterwards, I saw that I had hit the leopard straight on in the face, in the mouth. So it was dead in midair. But it still knocked me over and still scratched me. And I still, to those days, I still have these scratch marks in my neck. And anyhow, there we were, and we were both pretty shaken. And because it's not normally when you, as I say, I always say a leopard has 5 mouths. One in the regular position in his head, one in each foot, and if it had bloody claws and teeth in its butthole, it will bite you with that as well. And the other thing about a leopard is, if it comes for you, it does not growl. A lion roars when it comes, or growls when it comes. Not a leopard. The first thing you hear about a leopard is crunching bones, and that's usually your own neck bones. So if you don't know what's good for your health and you don't know what you're doing, stay away from leopard hunting. More so if it's a wounded leopard. Stay away from it. That's not good for your health, and you're gonna get the short end of the stick. Period. Okay, so we got the leopard. It was a huge leopard. It was, after we skinned it, it was 9 feet 7 inches. from the tip of the nose to the tip of the tail. And I have a picture here in the book where I have that leopard skin hanging, and I'm standing next to it, and you can see that it was 9 feet 7 inches. It was one humongous damn leopard. Well, as I say, we were pretty shaken, but at least it worked out well. And now the other thing that I just want to, before I end off this section on the leopard, one thing, if you're strong enough to hold a leopard or to fend it off in a way that you can hold the head away from crunching your neck bones or anything like that, that doesn't mean you are going to get away unscathed. Because with the hind legs, it's going to kick and it is going to, you think it's going to just bite you. No, the hind legs are going to disembowel you with that kicking and scratching and kicking and scratching. So most people who are involved with a leopard fight or a leopard altercation, they're not killed, they are disemboweled, and they die from that. So, you don't know the leopard, stay away. You're not going to win the disagreement. I continued with my modus operandi of planting groundnuts and corn, alternating my crops, 50% groundnuts, 50% corn, and then switching the following year where I had groundnuts, I would plant corn, and where I had corn, I would plant groundnuts. But greed is greed, and greed is a terrible thing. I very soon came to the conclusion that I am not making as much money as my neighbors were. My neighbors upstream towards Farwater on the Magall River, on much smaller properties, they planted tobacco, and the profit per acre was many, many, many times better than my profit was with either groundnuts or corn or the two combined. So I lent my ears and eyes out, and I switched from food production to the devil's lettuce. The devil's lettuce being tobacco. This entailed serious capital outlay, and I had to take out serious loans to buy curing ovens, drying ovens for the tobacco, and I bought 4 of them because it takes about 10 days for an oven to cure, and in order to make a worthwhile living, you have to have at least 4 curing ovens or curing barns. Now, and it takes about 10 days after that you have started to cure that tobacco. As I say, 10 days, and of course, then it gets sorted or unpacked and put in a grading shed where you have grading people, and they would grade your tobacco into the different classes of tobacco as required by the co-op. And as it goes, the first year that I planted tobacco, oh my goodness, I made good money. And I was just using the word greed. And all of a sudden you just say, wait a minute, if I can make this kind of money, I can make a little bit more. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Don't ask me how I remember it. It's clearly engraved in my mind. It was round about 2:00, and I saw those terrible clouds building up to the south, cumulus nimbus, serious storm clouds. And I knew that this is not something normal, because all factors being equal, our rains, even serious rains, come either from the north or from the east. And these rolling, approaching, roaring clouds came way too fast. And came way too fast our way. And it sounded like, when it eventually got to us, it sounded like a diesel train locomotive, of which the pistons and everything went wrong and broke, and gearboxes have stripped. I've never heard such a roaring, rumbling sound in my life. There was no rain. It was just hail. It was not hail as we know it, round chunks of hail. These were chunks of ice, as big as a grown man's fist. And when it started coming down, you could see the bark being hit of the trees on the southern side of the trees, on the south side of the trees. I could see the thatch on the thatch roof being ripped by hail chunks on the roof of our house. It lasted about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. But the hail was lying about 18 inches thick on the ground. And on the one side, I wanted to go and look and see for myself what my fields looked like. But on the other hand, I was too afraid to go and face the truth. Nonetheless, I went to my truck, my Toyota Land Cruiser, and I could not make out if the dents were on the truck or the truck were on the dents. All the windows were shattered. The windshield was in a million pieces. But at least the truck started. And I drove to the fields. And as I drove past my sheds, I noticed 6 sheep dead and 4 head of cattle, young calves, dead. Not from the lightning, from the hail. And as I approached my tobacco fields, I saw what used to be tobacco fields was nothing. There was one lone thing there that resembled a tree trunk, which I could not understand. And as I have got closer, I saw that was actually my ranch foreman, dear ranch foreman, Morris Mogorosi, and he was also one of my tractor drivers. So he beat me to it to go and look and see what was going on and what was left of our tobacco crop. He was walking on, all hunched over, with both his hands behind his back, just slumped forward, walking, checking. And when I got there, neither of us spoke. We just got close together and we hugged each other, and both of us just freely sobbed, because Morris knew that was his seasonal work. I knew that was my seasonal work. As a matter of fact, I knew it was a lifetime's work that had been destroyed because of the capital outlay of the ovens, etc., etc. Yes, we had insurance, But the insurance on tobacco, especially on hail, your deductible was 60%. So if you insure your crop for 100,000 and it gets totally destroyed, you're going to get paid out 40,000. But then you still got other overheads. So basically, you end up with bugger all, with nothing. And that's how it went with us. A lifetime of work was destroyed. As I say, it was me and Morris, and eventually I turned around. He went back to his house, and I went back to my house. And it was a very long night because now the following day we had calls to make. Yeah, the bank manager to call, the insurance to call, the farmers co-op, you name it. And I realized, both Tia and I realized, that our farming days were soon to be something of the past. Our farming days, our ranching days. I tried as best as I could, but the large lump in my throat remained, regardless how many times I tried to swallow it. It simply would not go away. But my friend Bart Simon's words again came to mind. We can run out of money as long as we don't run out of plans. And that same night, I made a plan.